The morning they buried Daniel, I stood in the rain outside St. Catherine's Church in a black dress that still smelled like his cologne. Not because I'd borrowed it from him, because I'd pressed my face into his side of the closet the night before and wept until I couldn't breathe, and then without thinking, I'd reached for the nearest black thing I owned, and it happened to be the dress I'd worn on our 32nd anniversary, the last night he told me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. I was 61 years old, standing on wet pavement in heels that were slowly sinking into the mud, and my own daughter had told me, with the flat, practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed the words, that I was not welcome inside. "This is what Dad would have wanted," Vanessa had said on the phone the night before. I had laughed, actually laughed, because the alternative was screaming. Daniel Raymond Ashworth had been my husband for 34 years. He had held my hand through 2 miscarriages, a cancer scare, and the year my mother lost her mind to dementia and forgot my name. He had danced with me in our kitchen at 2 in the morning to no music at all. He had written me letters, actual handwritten letters on cream-colored stationery, every anniversary, tucked them into my underwear drawer where he knew I'd find them on an ordinary Tuesday when I needed them most. He was the only person in the world who called me Rosie and made it feel like a privilege. And now Vanessa, his daughter from his first marriage, the woman who had called me a placeholder at Christmas dinner 6 years ago and then smiled as if she'd made a joke, Vanessa was standing at the church door in tailored black wool, directing the guest list like a maitre d', and my name wasn't on it. I should tell you about Daniel. He was the kind of man people described as steady. Not exciting, not flashy, steady. Like a table you could put your whole weight on and trust that it wouldn't wobble. He had grey at his temples by the time I met him, crow's feet that deepened when he laughed, and a handshake that made strangers immediately trust him. He coached youth baseball on Saturday mornings even though neither of us had children at home anymore. He brought soup to sick neighbors. He remembered every birthday in his contact list and sent actual cards, not texts. He was also, I came to understand over 3 decades, a man who carried an ocean of guilt about his first marriage. Vanessa's mother, Patricia, had left when Vanessa was 11. Not because Daniel was cruel or unfaithful, he wasn't, and I say that as a woman who had every reason to look for cracks. Patricia had simply fallen out of love the way some people do, quietly and completely, like a tide going out. She'd moved to Portland, remarried, had 2 more children, built a whole new life. And Vanessa had stayed with Daniel. That should have made them close. In the movies, it would have. The daughter who chose her father, who grew up in his house, who knew where he kept the spare key and which mug was his favorite, that daughter should have loved him the way you love someone who showed up. But Vanessa had spent 30 years loving her father the way some people love things they resent needing, possessively, jealously, with a grip that left marks. When Daniel and I got married, she was 23 and perfectly capable of being gracious. She chose not to be. She sent a card to the wedding instead of attending and signed it best wishes, Vanessa, not love, not even her last name, just Vanessa, like she was signing a business contract. For 34 years I had tried. God, how I had tried. Birthday calls she didn't return. Christmas gifts she accepted without comment. Invitations to holidays she declined with one-line emails. I made Daniel's favorite recipes and sent them home with him when he visited her. Little aluminum trays of lasagna and lemon bars, as if food could carry the message I couldn't say out loud. I am not your enemy. I am just someone who loves him too. The trays always came back empty, but she never said thank you. Daniel knew. We talked about it in the careful, circular way long-married people talk about the things they've agreed to live with. He would sigh, and I would say it's okay, and we both knew it wasn't, and we loved each other anyway. She'll come around, he used to say. He believed it. That was the thing about Daniel. He believed people were capable of better, always, right up until the end. He died on a Tuesday in March, which felt wrong. Daniel deserved to die on a Sunday, something gentle and unhurried. Instead it was a Tuesday, 6:47 in the morning, a cardiac event so swift the paramedics said he likely felt nothing. I had been downstairs making coffee. I heard the thump, a soft sound, barely anything, and I knew. I took the stairs 2 at a time in my socks, and found him on the floor beside the bed, already still, already somewhere I couldn't reach him. I called 911, and then I sat on the floor beside him and held his hand and talked to him until the ambulance came, because I did not know what else to do, and because 34 years of loving someone means you keep talking even when you're not sure they can hear. Vanessa arrived at the hospital 40 minutes after I called her. She walked past me in the waiting room without stopping, sat on the opposite side. When the doctor came out, she stood and intercepted him before he reached me, his wife, his next of kin, and received the news with her chin lifted and her jaw set, and then she turned and told me he was gone as if she were delivering a memo. "I'll handle the arrangements," she said. I should have fought her then, I know that now, but grief does something strange to your instincts. It strips away the part of you that knows how to be combative. I nodded. I went home. I pressed my face into his closet and tried to breathe. The call came the following evening. "The service is Thursday at St. Catherine's," Vanessa said, 11 o'clock. "I'll be there," I said. I was thinking I could say a few words, maybe the Neruda poem he loved, or... "That won't be necessary." A pause. I thought I'd misheard her. "I'm sorry. The family has decided to keep the service intimate." Her voice was smooth and cool as river stone. "Close family," his side. "Vanessa," I said her name carefully, the way you set down something fragile. "I am his family. I am his wife." "You were his wife," she said. "He's gone now, and this is what he would have wanted." There it was again, what he would have wanted, delivered with the confidence of someone who had decided, privately, that they were the sole authority on a dead man's wishes. "His side," I repeated. "I am his side, Vanessa, for 34 years. "I'll send you the obituary link," she said and hung up. I called his brother Frank, who had been a groomsman at our wedding, who sent us a poinsettia every Christmas, who called Daniel the good one and meant it. "Rose," his voice was pained. "I heard, I'm so sorry. She has power of attorney. She handled everything. I don't know what to do. Can you talk to her?" I tried. A long silence. "She's not budging. She says she's protecting his legacy." His legacy, as if I were some kind of threat to it, as if 34 years of loving a man could be rewritten into something shameful. I went anyway, of course. I put on the black dress and the heels, and I stood in the rain outside St. Catherine's like some kind of ghost at my own life, watching people file past me, Daniel's colleagues, his baseball families, neighbors who squeezed my arm and looked horrified and didn't know what to do, while Vanessa stood at the door and pretended I wasn't there. One of his former students, a boy named Marcus who was now 30 and a schoolteacher himself, stopped on the steps when he saw me. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said, "why are you out here?" "Long story," I said. He looked at the door, looked back at me, and then, without another word, he turned around, came back down the steps and stood beside me in the rain. He didn't say anything else. He just stood there, this young man with umbrella-less shoulders getting soaked, bearing witness. I don't think I'll ever forget that. The reading of the will was 11 days later. I almost didn't go. My own attorney, a woman named Diane who had the energy of someone who had seen everything and was no longer surprised by any of it, told me I absolutely had to go. "He was your husband," she said. "Whatever she's planning, you need to be in that room." Vanessa was already seated when I arrived at the attorney's office, a firm downtown, mahogany and leather, the kind of place that smelled like consequence. She looked up when I walked in and her expression cycled through surprise, irritation, and finally a kind of careful blankness. She had brought her own attorney. I noticed she was wearing the pearl earrings I'd given Daniel to give her one Christmas. She'd worn them to his funeral too. I didn't know if that meant something or nothing. Daniel's estate attorney, a soft-spoken man named Gerald Park, waited until we were all settled, and then he opened the folder. What followed was 45 minutes that rearranged the architecture of everything. Daniel had updated his will 8 months before he died. Vanessa received the lake house in Vermont, the one that had been in his family for 3 generations, the one she'd spent summers at as a child, the one I had always known, quietly, was hers in some essential way that had nothing to do with paperwork. She received his investment portfolio, his vintage watch collection, a letter. Gerald mentioned the letter with a careful neutrality that suggested he had read it and had feelings about it, addressed to her personally, sealed. She received, in other words, everything she had been expecting. And then Gerald turned the page. The house, our house, the Victorian on Clement Street that Daniel and I had bought together 27 years ago, that we had repainted 4 times and rewired twice, and filled with 34 years of ordinary life, went to me outright. No conditions, no shared ownership. Mine. His pension and the life insurance policy Vanessa had apparently not known existed, went to me. And then there was the other letter, not sealed, meant to be read aloud. Gerald cleared his throat. To anyone present who may be confused about my wishes, Daniel had written, in the formal, careful sentences he used when he wanted to make sure he was understood, I want to be clear. Rose is my wife. She has been my partner, my home, and my most constant companion for 34 years. Whatever complications have existed in my family, they have never diminished what she is to me or what she deserves. I stared at the mahogany table. I am aware that my death may create an opportunity for old grievances to resurface. I am asking from wherever I am that this not happen. I am asking for kindness toward the woman who held my hand every day of our life together. I am asking Vanessa, and I say this with love because I have always loved her and I always will, to ask herself what I would actually want, not what she believes I should want, what I would want. The room was very quiet. Vanessa's attorney was looking at his pen. Vanessa was looking at the table. Rose, the letter continued, and my name in his handwriting felt like hearing his voice. If you're hearing this, then I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted to. So I'll say it this way. Thank you for every ordinary Tuesday, for the coffee, for the way you laugh at your own jokes before you finish telling them. For 34 years of choosing me, I would choose you again in every life I get. Gerald set the paper down. I was crying. I had been crying for some time without noticing. Across the table, I heard a sound from Vanessa, a sharp, swallowed thing, barely a sound at all. When I looked up, she was staring at the letter with an expression I had never seen on her face before. She looked, for the first time in 34 years, like a daughter who missed her father. She called me 3 weeks later. I almost didn't answer. I stood in the kitchen, our kitchen, with the uneven tile Daniel had always meant to fix and never did, and watched her name on my phone screen for a long time. I answered. I kept the earrings, she said without preamble. I know, I said, they suit you. A long silence. He wrote me a letter too, she said, the sealed one. I didn't ask what it said, that was between them. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. Her voice was scraped clean of its usual armor. I don't know how to, I spent so long being angry, and now there's no one to be angry at, and she stopped. I sat down at the kitchen table. I know, I said. You hated me. No, I said, I never hated you. I wanted you to let me love you. That's different. Another silence, longer this time. He talked about you, she said quietly. When he visited, he always talked about you. Rosie this, Rosie that. I used to leave the room. A pause. I think I was jealous. I know, I said again. That's annoying, she said, that you're being kind right now. I'm not being kind, I said. I'm being tired. There's a difference. I'm 61 years old, Vanessa, and I just buried my husband. I don't have the energy left for anything except the truth. She was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. The truth, she said finally, is that he loved you very much. Yes, I said, he did. And I made it harder than it needed to be. Yes, I said, you did. Outside the kitchen window, the maple tree Daniel had planted the year we moved in was doing something hopeful with its new leaves, green and trembling and insistently alive. There's lasagna in the freezer. I said, if you want to come over. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. And somehow in the silence between us, two women shaped by the same loss, tangled in the same grief, trying to find the edges of something that might one day become forgiveness, I heard the echo of Daniel's voice, steady as ever. She'll come around. He had believed it right up until the end. Maybe, I thought, watching the maple, feeling the particular quiet of a house that still remembered someone, maybe he hadn't been wrong. Some people leave a will, others leave a map. Daniel left both and trusted us to find our way.